grab a phone. Don't need anybody throwing anything at me because I go over. Miss Tina said she would if I did, so she's already picking on her watch like it's time to go. My brother Charles asked me to do Sunday morning. I'm like, okay, so I get real focused on him. And needless to say, when he threw this Sunday night, even though it was a week apart on me, I'm like, if this is anything what a pastor's like, I don't want to be a pastor. These things come too quick. You ain't got enough time. It's like every time you turn around, you got to preach on something. Then he goes, take care of Wednesday too. So if I think fall out in the past or something like that, just realize I stayed up late last night trying to button up this little bit of, it's not real long, I'll tell you that up front, but it had a very strong meaning Wednesday night with one of the stories that I did with the lepers, with our youth. So anyway, all that to say this, when we come to church, what are we seeking? Who are we seeking? And when I stop and think about it, I've been in several churches, been in some big churches, and I'm not going to mention the church's name, but one of the churches I was in, you would hear people talking in between services because they literally had two services. You had your 9 a.m. service, you had your 10 a.m. service, and you're talking 5,000 people, so there's a lot of people moving through this church. And I overheard a guy one morning said, well, the only reason I come to church is just so people can see I'm at church, so I can sell more of whatever because they see I'm a churchgoer. And when he said that, I'm like, well, you're here for the wrong reason. So that statement just kept sticking out, and I'm like, okay, Lord, that's the direction we'll go. That's the way we will go. So in Luke chapter 14, verses 11 through 19, there's 10 individuals. These 10 individuals all have leprosy. And there were certain things you had to do when you have leprosy when you're in the outside looking in. And I actually told the youth wrong Wednesday night, so I have to apologize to them and correct it because it was one of those last minute situations. So you're supposed to cry out, unclean, unclean. You have this thing around your neck. You kind of stand out. There's something wrong with you. I'm not clean. You don't need to be near me because if you get near me and get leprosy, because number one, when I looked up leprosy, I didn't realize, I thought it was something that maybe an individual was born with, but it's actually an infection. And that infection can be passed, weirdly enough, just like COVID, by people breathing it. And I thought that was very unique at the end of the day, but of course, we've got antibiotics and everything else these days, so hopefully we don't see anybody with leprosy. But in this verse, we see 10 people. And it starts in verse 11. It says, now it happened as he went to Jerusalem that he passed through the midst of Samaria and Galilee. Then as he entered a certain village, there met him 10 men who were lepers, who stood afar off. And they lifted up their voices and said, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. So when he saw them, he said to them, go, show yourself to the priest. And so it was that as they went, they were cleansed. And one of them, when he saw that he was healed, returned and with a loud voice glorified God and fell on his face at his feet, giving him thanks. And he said, let me say that again, and he was a Samaritan. So Jesus answered and said, were there not 10 cleansed? But where are the 9? Were there not any found who returned to give glory to God except this foreigner? And he said to him, arise, go your way, your faith has made you well. So Jesus lays this out. Here's these 10 individuals. They all got a situation. They've all got a problem. They're unclean. They can't go with their family. They can't go worship. They can't go in the house of God. There's all these things they can't do, but there's a lot of things they've got to do. In that situation, there was 10 individuals. 9 of them, I believe, were looking for healing. But there was one of them there looking for the ultimate healing. He came, he was seeking Jesus. The other nine, I'm not sure what they were. Were they the individual who, like at church, I heard this guy can heal me. Let me go get healed. I can get back with my family. I'm good to go. So, in this process of reading what it takes to be cleansed or cleansed by the priest, once you think you're cured, it's a very long, drawn-out process. It takes 7 days. And I found this very unique. You go to Leviticus 14 and read it. It's a very long, drawn-out, a lot of these, buts, and ands. So I found a little boiled-down version of it. So the first thing that the individual has to do, once they determine that they're clean, or they think they're clean, they have to be examined by the high priest outside the camp. That's step one. So there's an examination. Then there's offerings. The priest would order 2 live birds, some cedar wood, scarlet yarn, and hyssop. And then comes a ritual. The priest would kill one bird over fresh water in a clay pot, then dip the live bird and the cedar wood, the yarn, the hyssop, into the blood of the killed bird. Then there was a sprinkling. The priest would sprinkle the person to be cleansed 7 times with the blood mixture. Then a release. The priest would release the live bird in the open fields. A washing. The person would wash their clothes, shave their heads, and bathe. Which, that's kind of alarming if that's the only time they bathe. Entry. The person would enter the camp, but they would stay outside their tent for 7 days. So they weren't allowed to physically go back into their house yet. And then there was a shaving. On the 7th day, the person would shave their head, their beard, their eyebrows, and the rest of their hair. All of this had to take place before they were officially deemed by the priest as being clean again, and allowing them to go in to be with their family. Of those 10 people, I believe all 10 of them went and got the official blessing from the priest to say they're clean. But that one who comes seeking what he needed to be seeking, it wasn't the cure for leprosy. And I solely believe that's the point. It was never about that. He came for an eternal healing. He came that he knew that person was special. He knew Jesus was special. And not only was he special, he healed his problem not only on this earth, but his eternal home. And with that cost, I mean, that's a lot of cost to have to go through just to be cleansed, to be back with your family. For him to take all of that one, to take all of that, take those 7 days, go through that whole process, and the first thing he does is go down and searches and finds Jesus and praises God for what he did for him. Not just hey, thanks for getting me back clean so I can be with my family, but praise God for who you are, what you did, and thank you, and not only for this earthly healing, but for the eternal healing. Sometimes I think our motives are selfish when it comes to church. What can the church do for me? I've heard that. Is this church wealthy? What are they going to do? Are they going to give me what I need? Are they going to give me the food I need? It's all about me. Or, as I said earlier, the guy who said he was only in church just to be seen, because that helped the business. Well, God's blessing you ultimately through a statement that you just ain't quite figured out yet. And then, or you come to church, and then once you get done with church, we play our church during the time, and then we turn around and we leave here, and then we're a totally different individual until it's time to come back to church, and then we act like church again. So we have to keep asking ourselves, why or what are we searching for when we come to church? Are we truly coming to God to get that refreshing renewal, to come back and go out into this world and do what God has called us to do? We can compare these 10 people to lost people. You have 9 people who make a decision by not making a decision and not accepting Christ, which ultimately is their decision. And then you have that one who not only gets saved, but gets glorious saved. You know, I tell the youth all the time, they're like, well, I'm scared to talk to somebody because what if they end up knowing more about the Bible than me? I'm like, well, they found the real Jesus, and you need to go back and find the real Jesus. Or you need to listen to the Jesus that you know and get yourself brought up to speed with them, because if that's what you're worried about, we're in the wrong thing. But the one, he really realized what Jesus was. You know, I think I could see him sitting outside his tent for 7 days. That's 7 long days. I would go stir crazy sitting outside for 7 days. I go stir crazy for 10 minutes sitting down. I don't like to be moving. I'm an outside person. But in those 7 days, he had all the time to reflect on what just happened. In those 7 days, he figured out that Jesus is the Jesus that I was promised a long time ago. That Jesus is the Jesus that I need. That Jesus is the Jesus that's going to heal me. I can see him running to Jesus. You know, we're not told a whole lot about, you know, what descendants of the 10 they were. We weren't given names. We weren't given very much detail, except the one and then a strong statement Jesus said. But he realized, even though Romans wasn't written yet, but in Romans chapter 3, verses 21 through 24, but now the righteousness of God, apart from the law, is revealed, being witnessed by the law and the prophets, even the righteousness of God through faith in Jesus Christ, to all, and on all who believe, for there is no difference, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, being justified freely by his grace through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus. He knew, even though he was Samaritan, he knew he was lost. He didn't know what Jesus' ultimate goal or ultimate mission was on this earth, but he knew he needed him. And the second question on this, I'm just going to be short. Second question on this is, how will you respond when you find that who or what you are seeking? We see that the one guy, he went, he followed what Jesus told him to do. Go to the priest. Not only go to the priest, get the proper purification, get that the Jewish blessing that, okay, you're good to go. You're now back in the fold. And then, as soon as that happened, he sought to worship God. He went straight back to him and fell at his feet. A lot of times, I don't think when we come in the presence of God, we just think of him as, oh, it's God, I'm going to pray. We don't come to God and say, you know, I'm never worthy. You kneel down before him, you pray. You know, it's a lot of times I don't even think we kneel down. We just shoot them shotgun prayers and we hope something sticks. But we have one guy right here. He knew. He knew. If you go back to verse 15, and one of them, when he saw that he was healed, returned, and with a loud voice glorified God. That tells us everything we know or we should do. Not only once we find who we're looking for, and we accept that thing that we've been seeking and longing for, that we go and we worship God. The 9, we're not told what happened to them. We're not real sure. But if they sought purification, which I believe they did, because ultimately they wanted to be back with family and friends, that had to be their ultimate goal. That's where they stopped. They got that earthly healing. And I don't think they saw the big picture. I don't think they had a clear, determining direction. They knew they had to be clean because they wanted to come in, they wanted to potentially worship God. There's several assumptions you can make there. The alarming fact is none of those 9 returned. Only that one of those, all those 10. You know, it's sometimes selfish motion or motives can drive us to do things we really don't need to do. Say that bad thing about that individual that doesn't need to be said. You know, I've shared this before, but I've got a coworker, I promise you, if I could climb through a phone and put my hands around his neck, I probably would hurt him really bad. It's just every time he comes to me with just bad answers, negative answers. There's nothing positive about him, and it just drives me absolutely bonkers. So I have to, Jesus, you're going to have to love him through me because I'm fixing to send something that I don't need to send, so you better type it. And of course, a nice email gets sent, thank goodness. One of these days, I feel like I'm going to get HR calls on me because of him, but anyway. Long story, you just have to meet him. But here are the 9. What did they miss? What do we as Christians sometimes miss? We're given an example. He was given, all 10 of them were given the same directions. How many of us, if we took a poll in here, would say, okay, yeah, I go and I do exactly what, the Great Commission says I go. I do. How many of us truly do? We looked last Sunday morning, we had the message we had about Jonah. How many of us went and found our Nineveh? How many of us went and talked to our Nineveh? I will say my dad talked to me more this past week than he's ever talked to me in probably my entire life. I almost was to the point, are you on something, what is up? But I enjoyed every minute of it, though. It was amazing to see him excited and full of life like he was. We see that Jesus shows his disciples and us that all can come. Because here's these 10 individuals. We know one of them is a Samaritan. We're told the one's a Samaritan. The other 9, we're not sure. But he's very clear that all, every, not a single person is missed can come to Jesus Christ if they so choose. Free gift. And last Sunday we talked about the Samaritan and the priest that went down the road, saw the guy injured, and then they went around him, and then the next guy went around him, and then, here's the Samaritan who picks him up and takes him to the inn, pays for all his medical bills and everything else. It's that old sorry Samaritan. The ones that Jews look down on so much, despised. Here's the Samaritan. And here's the Samaritan, the only one of those 10 that come back. In the part of that, you can say that, okay, maybe sometimes we get a little wrapped up too much in our religion and not the act of being Christ, hand, feet, mouth, go in direction. We see in Matthew 17, 1 through 8, it says, after 6 days, Jesus took him, Peter, James, and John, the brother of James, and led him up a high mountain by themselves. There he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as the light. Just then there appeared before them Moses and Elijah, talking with Jesus. Peter said to Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. While he was still speaking, a bright cloud covered them, and a voice from the cloud said, This is my son whom I love. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him. When the disciples heard this, they fell face down to the ground, terrified. But Jesus came and touched them. Get up, he said. Don't be afraid. When they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus. Here they are. They see Jesus in his full glorified self, and they had nothing but one option, and that was to fall face down. In Revelation, what does John do when he sees Jesus? He falls face down. Do we fall face down? Once we find what we're seeking, and we find the Jesus that stepped into nothing and created everything, do we fall on our face? Do we have those moments? That's the worship that Adam and Eve, I believe, had with Jesus in the garden before they got kicked out. You know, we're told that Jesus walked in the cool of the day with them. That's what we're all longing for anyway. To be with our Savior, to be with the one who created us. Just as the disciples fell face down, shows we should be there. Deuteronomy 4:29, but from there you will seek the Lord your God, and you will find him if you seek him with all your heart and with all your soul. I'm going to say that one, he sought. He knew what he was seeking for. He found what he was seeking for. And he was going back to worship what he was seeking. The 9, again, we don't know what happened to them. But that tells me there's at least 9 souls out there that needed to find Jesus Christ. Did they find a portion? Did they later in life find him? We don't know. That's one of the questions when I get to heaven, I'm going to ask Jesus. First question is going to be, why in the world did you allow mosquitoes to get on the boat? And the second question is, what happened to the 9? I mean, it's seriously, think about it. Noah could have went, it would have been in. None of these big old pterodactyl things we have sucking blood all the time. In John chapter 10, 14 and 15, it says, I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, I lay down my life for my sheep. Once this one knew he had found the shepherd, he knew he was a sheep, and he went back to find the shepherd. He didn't have to have the shepherd come find him in that sense. You know, today you can find that shepherd. You can find that healer. You can find that person or that thing that you've been seeking for, that big void that's in you that you don't know how to fill it. I tell the youth all the time, oh, you want to go drink beer. You're trying to fill the hole. Oh, I want to go smoke cigarettes. You're trying to fill the hole. You're seeking for something. We're told all the way back in Genesis what we're seeking for. But yet you keep looking. I remind them all the time. Ecclesiastes, you want to know what not to go do? Go read the book of Ecclesiastes. He did it. And it's chasing after the wind. It's pointless. It's vain. Pour your heart out to God and you will find that thing you're looking for. So, you know, you go back to these things you have to do to be cleansed. Thank the Lord that Jesus gave us an easier way. All he said is those who confess with their mouth and believe in their heart. We don't have to go, and we don't have to have the high priest or the preacher bless us to say, okay, yeah, if we think they're clean. We don't have to go buy no birds and, you know, kill one of them and dip blood on it and throw it on everything and, you know, sit outside our house for 7 days. All we have to do is accept. And that's the question you need to ask yourself tonight. Are you ready to find what you've been seeking for? And what have you been seeking for? As simple as that question is, we all have to ask it. I told you getting out early. Very short. I can call Brother Charles up and get him on the phone, extend it at least 20, 30 minutes. But we have to ask ourselves, number one, are we saved? Are we the person? Are we seeking that person that we need to seek? We have to ask ourselves, if we have found that person we're seeking, are we seeking the right things after the fact? Are we going after Jesus to be his hands, feet, mouthpiece? And then the third question is, if we need a home, we need Jesus, I think we all can say this home is awesome. I've said it a million times, I'll say it a million times over. I've never been in a church and felt like part of the family like I do in this church. And if you can't feel welcome here, boy, you ain't going nowhere else to feel welcome. So as we stand and sing our hymn of invitation, ask yourself those two questions.